Hello and welcome. What the fuck? We'll just restart that. Blip, 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 blip. Here we go. Hello and welcome to Three's a Crime, a true crime podcast. I'm Tori.
I'm Emily.
And I'm Lindsay.
And that's our intro.
Here we are professional podcasters.
We're podcasters, bitches. Warning, today's story covers the kidnapping and murder of a small child. It contains information detailing assault, dismemberment, and torture. Listener discretion is advised. So today we're going to talk about the disappearance and murder of Adam Walsh. Some parts of the information are very scarce online, and some there's like a ton, and a lot of it is contradictory, and there's I just went down rabbit hole after rabbit hole after rabbit hole. So this is by no means all of the information, but it's already 14 pages and you got to stop somewhere or I was going to lose my goddamn mind. And it's funny. I didn't even find, there weren't even a lot of
I was gonna say I haven't really seen any documentaries.
There's no
things.
well publicized documentaries. I did find one episode of a show and I have it in my notes. Not handy, but there was one Cold Blood. I don't know. There's some show that I found on Discovery Plus where there was one episode and it's really funny because it totally skews to a particular narrative.
Oh.
That I'm not entirely sure I buy 100%. So we're just going to get into it. In 1981, the Walsh family was living the American dream. College sweethearts John and his wife Reve had been married for 10 years and they had a 6-year-old son Adam. They were living in the idyllic small Florida town of Hollywood. That is Hollywood, Florida, not Hollywood, California. It was definitely upper middle class,
Okay.
The streets are safe. Your kids can ride their bikes without, whatever. John was a high-level hotel developer. I watched a lot of interviews with him, and he likes to make a point of I was building this $29 million hotel, whatever. My opinion of John Walsh has skewed slightly.
It is very, it's great watching it happen.
And so it's, anyway. Reve was a stay-at-home mom. So, he was making excellent money. He was in a partnership with somebody else. They had their own company. So he was making big bucks for the early 80s. On the afternoon of July 27th, 1981, everything changed for the Walsh family. But it also changed everything for America and how America responds to missing children. On this normal Monday, Reve was up at 8. Adam was up shortly after. Jimmy Campbell, a family friend, stopped by the Walsh house at 9:30 a.m. John had already left for work at this point. Jimmy and Reve had a cup of tea while Adam snuggled up with his mom. Jimmy left and he got to work about 11 a.m. Meanwhile, Reve and Adam packed up, went to St. Mark's Lutheran School to pay his tuition, and then they head off to the mall to go to Sears to buy a lamp. Now, Reve had seen a particular lamp in one of those Sunday advertisement things that was on sale, and so she knew exactly what she was going in for. So they enter through the north entrance of the department store, right? So we all know in the mall, there's usually multiple entrances and exits for the big stores.
Yes.
On their way to the lighting department, they passed an Atari kiosk that had over 2,000 games on display and then little controllers that the kids could play.
6-year-old walking past.
Right. Well, exactly. And he's a little boy. And remember, the Atari video console was only first introduced in 1977.
Shit.
So in 1991 or 1981, video
Still
games
brand
were
new.
still, brand new and massive.
Yeah.
And so as they go by, there's a couple little boys and they're already playing with the little controllers. And so Adam wanted to stay with the big boys at the kiosk.
He was a cute kid.
Very cute. Stop looking at pictures.
I can just look at pictures of his cute little face.
Yeah.
He looks like
I want to see his face.
he just
Oh.
is like a cute little boy.
Very cute little boy.
Missing teeth and freckles.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, literally they looked like the All-American family.
Yeah.
Like, John Walsh, I have to admit, because he's got to be, in his 70s now, he still looks real good. He was a handsome man in his, in his
when
youth.
You got money, you can
Oh, yeah.
your face full of shit.
So, Reve knew that it was only going to take a few minutes to get what she needed, and she was only going to be a few aisles away. So, she allowed Adam to stay at the kiosk while she goes off to purchase her lamp. Reve told Nightline in 2011, I said, I'm going right over here to the lamp department, and he said, okay, mommy, I know where that is. And this was not uncommon in the 80s, that parents would let their kids go to the toy department to entertain themselves so they could get their shopping done. I mean, I remember doing that. But what really freaked me out is I recently watched that 8-Bit Christmas movie on HBO, and there is a scene where the main character in the movie, because the whole movie is about the fact that he wants a Nintendo and how he got his first Nintendo. And there is this scene that almost mirrors this exactly, where he's with his mom and his sister or whatever in a department store, and there's a Nintendo kiosk, and the Nintendo kiosk is like, come play me, and how obsessed he gets with it. And so I'm working on this story where this just happened, where I'm reading this and then I'm watching this wholesome Christmas movie with a scene almost exactly like it. And I'm just like, I don't like it. I don't like this at all.
It's infiltrating your Christmas.
It really is. So now Reve and Adam had gotten to Sears about noon. And so she said that about, when she returned to the kiosk a few minutes later, it was about 12:15 p.m. All of the boys, including Adam, are gone. She had been away from him for less than 10 minutes.
How big is this kiosk? Multiple people can play it?
There were 2 controllers. So we'll get into this later, but they find this out much later. But when she walked by and Adam decided to stay, there were 2 groups. There was a group of African-American boys and a group of white boys. And I think, and both of them had some older kids and younger kids.
Right.
And so they were playing each other.
Right. And probably taking turns. On the
Exactly.
Okay,
yes. So when Reve comes back, everybody's gone. The kiosk is now, nobody is there.
That's weird.
So Reve panics and runs around the store. She runs out to the parking lot. She's screaming for Adam. When she's unable to find him, she approaches a security guard who sends her to customer service. When she got there, she'd asked the store to please page Adam on the store's intercom, but they didn't want to do it. And so eventually they gave in, and Adam's name was announced over the store speaker. Now, by chance, Reve happened to run into her mother-in-law, Jean, at that store. She just happened to be there too.
Yeah.
And so they searched the store for more than 90 minutes.
Whoa.
Reve called John at work, and he immediately heads over. At 1:55 p.m., so now this is almost 2 hours after she initially noticed that Adam is gone, Reve called the Hollywood Police Department. When the officers arrived, they tell the frantic parents that Adam just likely wandered off. He'll be home by dinner.
So different.
We need to have a conversation about what happens when kids go missing. I don't understand how that happens.
Well, so in this case, in 1981, the common practice was to wait at least 24 hours. That is not the case anymore. And part of that is because of this story.
All right.
I'll allow it then.
Usually when we hear we gotta wait 48 hours, it's usually an adult we're talking about now because
they can leave whenever.
Exactly.
Yeah, they have,
But In 1981, it was common practice to wait at least 24 hours. And I actually put this, which sounds insane to us now because we know that the first 48 hours
are the most crucial.
Exactly.
And for a 6-year-old, like, who waits 20?
Right.
Fuck you.
Right.
Like,
yeah.
no.
Which is, well, and that was exactly John and Reve's point. Like, no, this is not our son. Our son would not do this. But even still, the police assured the Walshes that Adam was just likely lost and that he would, he'd find his way back. So the Walshes continued to search the entire mall. Adam was not there. He was not in the parking lot, and their house was like 3 miles away. So it wasn't like a 6-year-old was going to wander 3 miles home.
Yeah.
So they continued to press the police and tell them this is not in Adam's nature to wander off. They provide the police with a picture of Adam, and finally, around 6:30 p.m., police start searching the nearby canals. So like in this area of Florida, like canals crisscross all over the place. And the cops did start to have a concern that maybe he had wandered or tried to walk somewhere and then fallen in one of the canals. So after 8 hours of waiting and pressing the police, John was like, fuck this. And he decides to organize his own search party that was made up of friends and family. They searched every golf course. They searched every canal they could find. And John and Reve made it very clear to investigators that they were not going to stop searching and like they were not going to not be pains in the asses. Yeah. And it's really funny because, and I'm jumping ahead a little bit here, but I want to say it before I forget because I didn't write it in here. But several of the interviews that I watched with John Walsh, he had said that one of the frustrating things for him was like they were upper white class and they could not get anybody to do anything initially. And I mean, even through progressing, which we'll go through the story, and he said, if I, as an upper class white man, can't get shit done, what are all these other people doing? Yeah. And the thing that's so fucked up is that, it's 2021 and we still see that same pattern. Now, white people do tend to get some attention, but if you're not white, too bad. If you're white and you don't come for money, too bad. So Reve ended up leaving her car in the parking spot, that she was in when they pulled up, just in case, he might come back to the car. And so they had gone home and they got a pillow and a blanket and they left a note on the car to Adam that was like, if you come back, get in the car, stay here, mommy and daddy will be back, or whatever. So the next morning they go back, no sign of Adam. And Reve kept going back to the car and checking, and John and his friends continued to search. The police actually called in reinforcements from across the state because now they know, like, shit. This is bad.
Oh, now we know it's bad?
Now we know it's bad. It's been 24 hours, and the 6-year-old didn't miraculously find his way home, so this became, like, the largest manhunt in Florida's history. Police were working overtime without pay searching for Adam. At this point, like, so many people now were really actually invested in finding this kid. John had asked the police about missing child posters, and the police department was like, yeah, we don't do those. So John made his own and put them up. I mean, they went out all over Florida. And, John thought, well, maybe like some distraught mother who lost her child, freaked, just saw Adam and was like, he's going to be my son now, and was afraid that that person might take him out of state. So he actually got the airlines to agree to give out the missing posters on flights and hang them up in airports. So most of the search for Adam was a completely grassroots effort put together by John and Reve.
Damn, go them.
Yeah. So the police, unable to find Adam or any clues, they brought in a psychic who said that she saw Adam in water. They're always in water. But with that news, so they began to search the canals again. Meanwhile, the Walshes were starting to run out of like liquid cash. They had put up a reward of their own money, and they were giving volunteers like gas money and food money. They had been on the local news, but they were looking for more national exposure. They reached out to all 3 major networks, so ABC, NBC, CBS, and they were turned down by all of them.
Wow.
Their response was if they did it for the Walshes, they would have to do it for every family, and this was a local case. One of the hosts that was on, and I don't remember which one it was, on Good Morning America at that time agreed to have them on. So 16 days now. This is 16 days after Adam's disappearance. John and Reve were scheduled to appear on GMA. That morning around 3 a.m., John's friend called asking if they had dental records for Adam. And John was like, I don't understand. Like, who needs dental records? Like, what's going on? So his friend says that they found the head of a little boy 120 miles north of Hollywood, and they want to check the dental records. Now, both of them are like, this can't be Adam, but, you know, okay, we'll send it anyway. And John and Reve go forward with being on GMA, and they do their public appeal. And his friend deals with the dental records and the police on his end.
It was the same day.
The morning that they were going on GMA, they get a phone call. After the show's taping, Reve had gone to get some lunch. John was in the hotel room, and he gets another call from his friend. And this time, confirming that the dental records were a match and the head that was found was Adam's.
Oh, no.
His friend had gone ahead and done the identification so that John and Reve wouldn't have to. And John said that he lost it and he started trashing the hotel. I mean, like breaking shit, throwing shit, just completely trashing the room. And so security was called, and they came to the room with a doctor and they gave him a sedative, and which, you know, rightfully so.
Yeah.
And so police were like,
it's not funny, but I'm like picturing him hulking out, and they're like,
yeah, that's what I'm like.
like, you know, like putting down an ape or something, like trying to tranquilize an animal.
Right. And so
throwing needles at him.
Police asked where Reve was, because they were like, we need to do the notification for her as well. And at this point, John had calmed down a little bit thanks to that sedative, and he was like, no, if anybody's going to tell my wife, it's going to be me.
Yeah.
A huge memorial was held for Adam, and many of the people attending had never met Adam but had been involved with the search. And one of the things that like kind of was a killer was John was like, there was a coffin, but there was no body in it. Oh. And they couldn't, like, the police had Adam's head for 27 years because it was considered evidence. And so they couldn't even bury his head.
Oh my God. It was just a full empty coffin.
Full empty.
Yeah. Full empty?
You know what I mean.
Yes, it was just an empty coffin. Also, the rest of his body has never been found.
That is
so the
terrifying.
Only thing that they found was his head. And it's funny because this is not funny at all. In here, I say Adam's head a lot, and I kept trying to find
a better way to say it
that wasn't so harsh, but like saying the head, or it felt like demeaning to Adam, and like taking away his identity in some way. Yeah. And there really is no nice way to say decapitation, so I apologize. I mean, yes, but I didn't want it to be confusing because remains. I mean, to this day, his body has never been found.
Calling it Adam, I think that's fine. Yeah. I mean, it's a harsh.
Just know that, Just know she thought it through before she just said his head.
Yeah,
I did.
That's terrible.
So it was August 13th, 1981. 2 fishermen in Vero Beach had found the severed head in the Indian River County Canal. Police now knew that they were looking at a homicide.
Oh my God. The psychic was right.
Yeah, I mean,
shit.
technically, yeah, he was in water. The Broward County, I mean, but if you always say that they're in water,
It's
you're
true.
bound to be right.
It's true.
some
The
of
chances
time.
of you being right are pretty good.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah.
So the Broward County medical examiner, Dr. Ronald Wright, believed that Adam had been killed about 10 days before his body was found. And it appeared, and I'm so sorry, trigger. It appeared that an animal, likely an alligator, had chewed on the head.
Whoa, God.
Oh boy, Florida.
Florida, man.
Great job,
Yeah.
Florida, with your alligators.
Exactly. Police believed that Adam had been murdered elsewhere and then the head thrown in the canal. If the entire body had been dismembered, it's possible that part of the body or parts of the body may have been like all along the turnpike. They were like, I don't,
They
Dismemberment.
could have been eaten.
Yeah.
Are they sure, like, I'm sure you'll get into this, so if you do, tell me to fuck off. But, like, are they sure he was, like, decapitated from a person? It wasn't, like, do you know what I'm saying?
Yes, I do understand what you're saying. And I had that same thought. And
like an alligator didn't come chop
Yeah.
his
I
head off.
think that based on, and I couldn't find anything specifically ruling that out, but everything that I read made it sort of sound like it was a clean cut,
Mhm.
not
Okay.
a
Not from an animal.
dislocation.
Yeah.
Lieutenant Richard Hines, the lead investigator, stated there had to have been a massive amount of blood lost when his head was severed, and we didn't find any near the canal. He believed the killer had stopped his car somewhere along the northbound lanes and walked out to the canal because the area where Adam's head was found was not accessible by car. As police inquiries intensified, John and Reve were able to up the reward to $120,000, which would be more than $360,000 in today's money, leading to the apprehension and conviction of the murderer of Adam Walsh. So now we're going to talk about initial suspects, families and friends. Family and friends.
Family is in friend.
So as we know, in any investigation, police are always going to look at the family or anyone with a close access to the victim. So John and Reve were questioned, as well as John's mother, Jean, and his brother, Joseph. They were all interviewed, had sessions with hypnotists, took polygraphs. They were all cleared very early on.
Hypnotist. Did they actually use that? Like, did police use that back then?
Yeah.
They used it a lot back then.
They did, and the guy that we're going to talk about next, so Jimmy Campbell, who was the one that had tea with Reve that morning, I know specifically that he did one under hypnosis because he divulged something that we'll talk about way later.
That's wild that was like, yeah, let's use that.
I know that.
And
Yeah,
let's
I
use-
mean, these guys were like...
I know it's early in the world of progress, but
Well,
it's just interesting to me.
When I was on my way to Oregon and I was listening to the case of the
you were listening to crime when you shouldn't.
I know. I was listening to the Hillside Stranglers, and they used hypnotism against Bianchi, I believe, and they used it to catch him in a lie, basically, to be like they would today with a polygraph test. It might not be admissible in court, but they can say, "Look, we know you were being deceitful," in hopes that they'll tell the truth. So they. I don't remember. He kept saying that he, like, saw someone there who wasn't there, so they brought the actual guy in, and he, like, addressed the actual guy, and they said, under hypnosis, you wouldn't have noticed the actual guy because you thought he was already in the room, kind of thing, so they caught him in a lie and got him to admit it. But I think that's typically why they use hypnosis.
Well, and I think, kind of to your point, Linz, the police at this point, and this is a small police force in a tiny little town in Florida.
That's true.
And this case has now become national news. I mean, they're consulting psychics.
Everyone
They've got
they can.
hypnotists. I mean, they wanted to wrap this shit up.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay, so after John, Reve, and the other family members, the police turned their attention to 25-year-old Jimmy Campbell, who, like I said, was the family friend that Reve had tea with the day of Adam's abduction. Now, some sources I read said that Jimmy was Adam's godfather, and some didn't mention it at all, and he was 25, and so I'm like, was he Adam's godfather? I don't know 100%, but all of the sources that I read said that Jimmy adored Adam and, like, really doted on him. Jimmy had recently moved out of the Walsh home where he had been living for several years. Now, the official story is that John met Jimmy at work and had decided to mentor him, and he allowed Jimmy to move in, and the only stipulation was that Jimmy had to be enrolled in junior college to live there. And when Jimmy decided that he wanted to drop out, John told him he needed to find somewhere else to stay, and so he did. Now, we're going to talk about this later. That's the official story.
Those boundaries are real good for John.
Yeah. I mean, I will say this: the dude is like a hard ass. Like,
God damn! I just let the person stay and die.
Yeah.
So they sucked me.
Like, oh, you want to quit school? That's fine. That's
okay,
fine.
I'll take care of you. Don't worry.
So police questioned Jimmy, and about this time, it was decided that the Little Hollywood Police Department needed some help, and so they brought in Miami detective Joe Matthews to help investigate and deliver the polygraph testing. The local police that had been working this case did not appreciate Joe's presence, especially because they had their own polygraph technician, and they were like, So Joe said it was like a political minefield, but he was there to do a job, and he was going to do it. So prior to discovering Adam's head, Jimmy had walked into Joe's office and asked why police were riding him so hard. And Jimmy said, he was like, I know that they think I killed Adam. He said, quote, I was close to Adam, closer than his father. I was his father, brother, uncle, and playmate. I could play with him and John would read to him. Adam would say, I have two fathers. One stays at home and one works. We're inseparable, totally. If he got scared, he would sleep with me. Now, Jimmy had taken a polygraph 3 days prior to, and this must have, this was prior. Jimmy had already taken a polygraph, but the results came back inconclusive. So he agreed to take a second polygraph with Joe Matthews administering it. Why are you laughing at me?
I'm laughing at her. Polygraph.
Okay. So the questioning went as follows. Do you know who took Adam? No. Do you know where Adam is now? No. Did you conspire with anyone to cause Adam's disappearance? No. Are you withholding any information from the police concerning Adam's disappearance? No. Do you suspect anyone of taking Adam? No. Did you take Adam? No.
Yes.
So Joe Matthews' interpretation of the second polygraph was that Jimmy was being truthful. And it was that day that, like later that day, that Adam's head was found by the fishermen.
No.
So like all of this is kind of all happening like at the same time. Like, so
the amount of things that are happening at the same time. Like, you got the phone call right before he went on Good Morning America.
Right. So I think that they had found him. So like I think the timeline is sort of Joe Matthews interviews Jimmy, and then sometime in the early morning of like that, like into that day, that next day, because they found, I feel like the fishermen found him early in the morning. And then...
How long has it been at this point?
16 days since he disappeared.
It just seems like a lot has happened in 16 days.
Yeah.
It's at this point, it feels like they've almost been doing it for like 6 months. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing, is that one of the things that we talk about is that it goes like real hot and heavy, and then
drops
and then
off.
So despite Joe Matthews declaring that Jimmy was being truthful on his polygraph, 2 other detectives, Jack Kaufman and Ron Hickman, were not convinced. Well, they were convinced. They were just convinced that Jimmy had done it. Like, they had a perfect, person to
scapegoat, be like, hey, that motherfucker.
So
it can be done.
He's 25.
He's 25.
Okay.
So on November 25th, 1981, they questioned Jimmy again, and they told him that they were unable to find anyone to verify his whereabouts from 11 a.m. when he said he arrived to work to 2 p.m. So Adam disappeared around 12:15, they think. So, I mean, that's a window. Exactly.
Yeah.
Now, Jimmy said that it was too windy to rent boats at the time, which is what he had planned on doing, so he had just stayed in his cabana. But there was another reason.
Why? Why does he have a cabana? What is this?
This is Florida, and these people have money. Like,
that's true.
It's just a life that we are not.
We aren't familiar with it. So we're like, what is a cabana?
I've heard of the cabana on a
It's like what you have, or like on a beach, people have cabanas.
Yeah, but not like.
Isn't it like an outdoor bed? Is like a cabana?
Isn't it like kind of like
a seating area or something? Like a little.
I just know from the Housewives.
We're trash, poor people.
Yeah, we don't have cabanas.
We don't have
We
cabanas.
don't.
But you'll take a cabana boy.
Oh,
Yeah.
in a banana hammock.
Did you say a cabana boy in a banana hammock?
Yes.
This is a family show.
Is it?
No.
Is it?
No, not at all.
No.
Not
Let's
at all.
fucking hope not.
Let's
Now, you assholes have ruined the punchline
I'm
here
sorry.
of the
Cabana
bomb
boy.
that I was just about to drop.
Can I pee and then I'll come
for
back?
fuck's
I will
sake.
pee and I'll come back.
I have to pee too.
Ready to not joke about it.
Son of a bitch.
I have to
All of
pee
you
too.
are the worst.
We are.
She's barely even had any. What are you drinking that you have to pee? You're peeing right now.
Hi, Emily.
Hi, Emily.
What are you doing? Are you farting? Are you? We don't
Make
know
sure
what
you
you're
wipe
talking
so you don't get your pants wet.
about. Put some of the pink stuff on your butt.
Yeah,
Please.
stuff, but
It helps. I just did it
but
earlier. But what would you say?
I said but but but
Butt.
but but.
I need your boot butt.
Where's your butt butt?
Where's your boot?
Put a pink stuff on your butt butt. So, other than this missing time period that Jimmy can't really account for, there is another reason that the police suspected that Jimmy was the person.
Dun dun dun.
And that reason
Oh no.
was Reve.
Oh, bro! When you were like, "Oh, he came over and had some tea," and I'm like,
She's like, did he though?
In
Did
my
he come
head,
over
I
and
was
have
like-
some tea?
Are these bitches banging?
Jimmy had admitted that he was in love with Reve and that they had had an affair.
I knew it.
And that he had moved out at John's request.
Yeah.
That the day he had moved out, that there had been an argument. But he insisted that he loved Adam, saying, "My life centered around Adam, period."
Well, and some pussy.
Yeah.
Apparently.
But I mean, I read some things that, like, under the hypnosis, he had divulged that they were having an affair, that they had been having an affair, that, you know, if he had had his shit together, that they would have gone off and had their own life, and that they would have
They
taken
always
Adam
say
with
that.
them, and all of this stuff.
That'll never,
And-
never happens, guys.
How old was mom?
Yeah.
I don't know how old they were. I want
That
to say that they
6-year-old. She's
were.
probably only like in her 30s.
Yeah,
not
I
much
think,
older.
No,
Tw-
they-
like
not-
late
Yeah,
20s,
they
30s.
weren't. They weren't much older
Right.
than Reve. It's not like he was
I'm gonna
25
look
and
up-
she was 45.
Right.
Them in the 80s, just so I can see what they look like. That's me. I'm the woman.
That's me.
I'm the woman in green with really big glasses and.
The fucking
We'll post this, don't you
Screenshot
worry.
that, yeah.
Reve's outfit and fucking hair is on.
Yeah.
Is on
I
it,
mean,
dude.
they were.
Reve.
But you can see, like, John was a handsome
Oh, yeah,
man.
they were
and
both
they're both
yeah.
attractive people.
Yeah, it's a very pretty couple.
Detectives were still skeptical because their theory being that Reve stayed with John because of Adam, meaning that Adam was the only thing standing in the way of Jimmy having Reve. But although there was no one to confirm Jimmy's alibi during that 11 to 2 time period, he had been seen in town shortly after 2 p.m. and it would have been impossible for him to abduct and kill Adam and get back
get
to
back
where he
there.
was in that time. I mean, even if he had just killed him and like hit him, there was no
Yeah.
way he could get to where he was at the
It's a
time
very
he was.
tight window.
Yes. Jimmy was cleared and was just removed as a suspect. So in 1995, another Walsh family friend, Michael Monahan, and I believe he had also been interviewed around that time, but he was interviewed again in 1995. He had lived with Jimmy at the time of the abduction. So basically when Jimmy moved out of John and Reve's house, he moved in with this Michael Monahan, who was also a family friend. Police were floating the theory that he had killed Adam as a favor for Jimmy, but this was quickly discredited and Monahan was eliminated as a suspect. So now we've talked about family and friends. Now we're going to talk about other people that were suspects in this case. And the first one that we're going to talk about is Odyss. And yes, that is Odyss, not Odyss. Odyss Toole. So we're going to talk a little bit about who Odyss was. So Odyss was born March 5th, 1947 in Jacksonville, Florida. His father was an alcoholic who abandoned the family pretty early in Odyss's life. His mother was abusive. Toole claimed that she would make him wear dresses and called him Susan.
Oh.
He claimed to have suffered both sexual assault and incest as a child from family, including his older sister, and acquaintances, including the next-door neighbor. In the documentary Death Diploma, Toole claimed that he was forced to have sex with a friend of his father's when he was just 5.
Oh my God. Wait, this doesn't matter, but was the
Christ.
friend a woman or a man?
I believe it was a man. He also claimed that his maternal grandmother was a Satanist who dubbed him the Devil's Child.
Oh, come on.
And
So mom
had-
is Satan.
And she exposed him to satanic rites and rituals, including grave robbing and self-mutilation. Self-mutilation.
What? I was like, mutilization. Is that a word?
It is not a word. That is a Tory special.
Mutilization.
Self-mutilation.
A grandma.
Mm-hmm. Supposedly. Now,
Usually Satan
just
doesn't tell you to do that.
literally everything that comes out of this man needs to be taken with a grain of salt.
Yeah.
So, but Odyss did have an IQ of 75.
Is that low? I don't know what
That's
a good
very
number.
low. That's like lower than what Forrest Gump was supposed to have in Forrest Gump.
Shit.
He also suffered from epilepsy and had frequent grand mal seizures. So that's
Oh, that
no
didn't
bueno.
help at all
No,
either.
no,
Jesus.
not at all. Odyss said that he knew that he was gay when he was 10, and he had his first sexual relationship with a neighbor boy when he was 12.
Except for that time he was 5.
First
Consent.
consensual sexual relationship. He frequently ran away from home and would sleep in abandoned houses. He had also developed a fondness for setting fires and had become a serial arsonist at a very young age, and claimed that he was sexually aroused by fire.
Oh my God. That's
Odyss-
not a surprise.
No, he dropped out of school in 9th grade and began visiting gay bars. He claimed he had been a teen sex worker and was obsessed with gay porn. And I mean, like, you had to, like, actively work for
was
gay
gonna
porn at that
say.
time. Like, there was no Pornhub. All right, so our good friend, Mr. Toole, not O'Toole, Toole, claims that he committed his first murder at 14
Wow.
when he was being propositioned for sex by a traveling salesman and then ran over the man with his own car.
Oh, okay.
His first
All right.
official arrest was at the age of 17 in August of 1965 for loitering, which I feel like, you know, after everything we just heard is kind of a little bit of like a ooh,
Yeah.
loitering. Between 1966 and 1973, Toole was completely off the grid. Authorities believe he was drifting along the southeast U.S. and supporting himself with sex work and panhandling, but they don't really know. While living in Nebraska, Toole was a prime suspect in the murder of 24-year-old Patricia Webb. Shortly after her murder, he moved to Boulder, Colorado. 1 month after arriving in Colorado, he was also a prime suspect in the homicide of 31-year-old Ellen Holman, who was murdered on October 14th, 1974. With all of these kind of suspicions hanging over his head, he fled back to Jacksonville. In 1976, Odyss was married for 3 whole days to a woman
Whoa.
who was 25 years his senior.
Oh.
He claimed that he married her as a way to mask his true sexuality, and she was like, as soon as she found out that he preferred men, she was like, I'm
Kicked
out of
him-
here. Yeah,
kicked
she
him
was
out.
done.
What a bummer. She gets married, and after 3 days, he's like,
Sorry, I like the
she's
penis.
like, son of a bitch.
Right?
Yeah.
And see, 25 years younger, she married a younger man, turned out to be gay. Just saying. Later, in 1976, Odyss met
Oh, no.
Henry Lee Lucas,
Lucas.
who some may know as the
Oh.
Confession Killer.
Yes.
Yep. He's another
They-
fucking twat.
I remember him saying that he drove to a different country to kill people.
Yeah, they were like, a bunch of Japanese journalists had come over to interview him, and he was like, I've killed somebody in your country. And they were like, oh, yeah, really? Like, how did you get there? And he's like, I drove.
And they're
No.
like,
No, Henry.
No.
No, you didn't.
You did.
Um,
There.
Anyway, they met at a soup kitchen, and they soon became lovers and began traveling together, sort of like natural born killers, and just drove around and supposedly murdered people. They were together for quite some time, murdering people, and I say that with quotations because we'll get into it. Before Lucas ran off with Odyss's 14-year-old intellectually disabled niece, Becky.
Ew.
Oh, I remember Becky.
Right. Because in that documentary,
Yeah.
remember, a
Oh
woman
my
comes forward and she's like, well, I
God.
was surprised to see that I was dead. And then it turns out it wasn't her. And then they found Becky's remains.
Yeah.
That was Odyss's niece.
Jesus Christ.
Do you see now
Wow,
the rabbit holes?
holes.
Like, I'm like, what the?
Because I remember you saying, I need to do Odyss. But then you're like, I don't want to do Odyss.
Yeah.
Lucas eventually murdered Becky. And Toole claimed that after Lucas had left him, he went on a murder spree of his own, including torture, murder, and cannibalism. On January 4th of 1982, Odyss barricaded a 65-year-old man named George Sonberg in a boarding house in Jacksonville and set it on fire.
Oh.
Unfortunately, Mr. Sonberg died a week later from the injuries he had sustained during the fire. In April of 1983, he was arrested for an unrelated arson and then confessed to the arson which killed Mr. Sonberg and signed a confession that he and Mr. Sonberg had been in a sexual relationship and had an argument, and that's why he had set the fire. He later recanted, saying that he had only signed this confession because he wanted to be sent back to Jacksonville. Jury didn't buy that, and on April 28th, 1984, he was found guilty and sentenced to death. Later that year, he was also convicted and sentenced to death for the murder of 19-year-old Tallahassee woman. He was convicted and sentenced to death for the murder of a 19-year-old Tallahassee woman, but on appeal, both of these sentences were reduced from death to life in prison. He was convicted of 4 other murders in 1991, and he was sentenced to 4 more life sentences.
Wow.
In June of 1983 is when Henry Lee Lucas was arrested and started confessing to all
everything.
kinds of
Yeah.
murders, and often implicating Odyss as an accomplice. Now, initially, Odyss denied involvement, but over time, he began corroborating Lucas's claims, and Lucas, in turn, began corroborating his as
Oh my
well.
God,
The problem, as it turns out, is that many, if not most, all of Lucas's confessions were later proven to be false.
Hence the confession
Killer. Yes. Odyss himself claimed that he had murdered upwards of 108 people, and most of those have also proven to be false confessions.
Did he get like cigarettes and free coffee for those?
Well, I mean, I think when Henry was being like, when he was confessing all over the place, they brought Odyss in as well, and so
okay.
yeah, like, I mean, I don't think he was giving quite the pampered treatment that Henry was, but
okay. I was just curious.
but yeah. So, on October 21st, 1983, while in custody on the 2 arson murders, Toole confessed to the murder of Adam Walsh. When detectives came in to talk with him about the other murders, he said something like, he thought he was like, oh, I thought you were here to talk to me about that boy I took. And police didn't really pay any attention to it until he mentioned it a second time,
Oh.
and then included Lucas, saying that that Lucas was there.
Mhm.
And he said that of all the people that he had murdered, he wished he hadn't committed this one. Like, I wish I hadn't killed that little boy. Toole claimed that he had abducted Adam and raped him for 2 hours before strangling him, and that Lucas had beheaded Adam with Toole's machete. He also told investigators where he had buried Adam's body and had tossed the head on the backseat floorboard for several days before disposing of it. You know, you can just
severed
forget
head in the
that you
backseat.
yes,
Well,
like
I mean,
In Florida.
right?
Yeah.
yeah.
Like,
It's
I
like
don't know.
110 degrees outside with 1,000% humidity, and he's like, "Oh yeah, I forgot there was a head in the back seat."
Can't smell that at all.
Oops.
Right?
Maybe
Or
he has
like
COVID.
it wasn't,
Oh, no.
rattling around. I mean, I hate to be callous like that, but like,
Well, yeah, it's
you know. But anyway, a few days after Toole's confession, the police department holds a major press conference announcing that Adam's murderer has been caught.
God.
But then no indictment came.
Mm-hmm.
Why, you ask? Well, one thing was that he had said that Lucas had been the one to actually dismember Adam, but Lucas was in prison in Maryland. Now, some sources say that it was like he was put into prison the day after Adam's disappearance. It doesn't really matter. At some he was in Maryland.
Yeah.
He was not in Florida at the time that Adam was abducted. Another problem was that Adam's body wasn't where Toole claimed it was. They took him out.
Adam's body was never found. So
Yeah, police had actually taken Toole out, and he was like, okay, they were like, show us where you did the stuff. And, he like stopped at one exit and he was like, oh, this is the exit and whatever. But there was no body there. He also showed them where he had dropped the head. Now that was correct. He was right about where the head was found. But I think, and I could be wrong. I could be wrong, but I think it had been in the papers at that point. And these motherfuckers were reading papers and,
they were admitting to driving to other countries. I mean,
they were, but also
drove all the way to Japan.
And guys. I mean, I don't know that Toole's interrogations went the same way that Lucas's did, but a lot of times in Lucas's case, the investigators were feeding the information, and then Toole was just filling in, or what's his face? Lucas was just filling in the blanks and whatever. So
every time you say Toole, I think
Toole. When they didn't find the body, he changed his story to say that he had cremated Adam. Then he said he'd covered him with leaves. It's like
it just grabbed whatever.
And so he was also unable to describe what Adam looked like or what he had been wearing. And then Toole later recanted this confession.
JK.
Yeah, exactly. It's just, it's just one of those things where police were just so sure that he had done it. And he did describe the murder in detail, and a lot of the points were correct. And then, but whatever wasn't correct, he would just keep changing his story to fit their narrative. Mm-hmm. This is crazy. A few weeks after Toole made his confession, police announced that they had lost Toole's impounded car and machete.
Amazing.
One source I read said that Toole's car had actually been sold to a scrapyard for $50.
Fabulous.
Jesus.
Now, of Toole's known victims, the youngest was 19. Adam didn't really fit Toole's preferred type. Hairs that were found in Toole's car did not match Adam's. John Walsh said that clothing, what made him think that it was Toole was that clothing similar to Adam's was found at Toole's house, particularly a pair of green shorts. But I don't know, I feel like clothing similar is not the same as Adam's clothes were found at his house. Odyss died in prison.
Darn.
On September 15th, 1996, at the age of 49 from cirrhosis.
Wow. Shit.
His body was unclaimed, and so he was buried at the Florida State Prison Cemetery. So that's first suspect.
Damn.
The next.
Goodbye, sir.
Another suspect in this case was
Jeffrey Dahmer.
Jeffrey Dahmer. Like Toole, there is no direct evidence linking Dahmer to Adam's death, but I think that there's enough circumstantial evidence that indicates he could have been involved.
Interesting.
So after his stint in the military, which
that's when the cannibalism started.
First of all, just Dahmer's story of being in the military, how many people, how many of his raped and it's fucking. I did not include any of that because I was just we can talk about that at a later date.
He's truly one of the serial killers that didn't get off on the killing. He got off on them being docile after dead.
I mean, he raped a lot of people in the military.
It was
Anyway, so after his stint in the military, Dahmer lived in Sunny Isles Beach, just a few miles from Hollywood, Florida, at the time of Adam's abduction. Witnesses also reported seeing a blue van in the area, and this blue van comes up a lot. And Dahmer drove a blue van for his job at a sandwich shop, which again was very close to the mall.
Wow.
One man, Willis Morgan, was so sure that he had seen Dahmer that day, he contacted the FBI again 10 years after the abduction when news of Dahmer's crimes broke in the 90s. He was just I'm telling you, I saw this motherfucker at the mall. Morgan actually wrote a book about this titled Frustrated Witness, the story of the Adam Walsh case and police misconduct. Another witness claimed to see a man in an army jacket abduct Adam and toss him into his blue van, and her description was said to resemble Dahmer's. There was another little boy who was almost abducted from a nearby mall, and the sketch that the boy's mother gave
Look like Dahmer.
It looks a lot like Dahmer.
Do you have a picture?
But yeah, we'll post it. I do have it in the past.
Holy shit, yeah. Gross.
Blech. Yeah.
So Dahmer at this point had also exposed himself to at least 2 male children.
Wow.
And this is another bombshell. Jeffrey's own father had called America's Most Wanted tip line to say that he thought Jeffrey was a pedophile and that they needed to look into him.
Bow, bow, bow.
That will forever. It's
Yeah.
just always gonna
Get
be.
it, yeah.
He fucking would. His dad fucking would.
Yes. Well, and as we know, Dahmer also beheaded many of his victims in an
Yeah.
attempt to save the skulls, which could be why only
The head
Adam's
was-
head was found. The head was also, oh, here we go. So the head was also said to have been a clean cut, where Toole said he had used a machete, which wouldn't have given a
No.
clean cut.
He would have been hacking.
Yeah, that's what I
marks.
was like. That motherfucker
Yeah.
was hack that shit.
Yeah.
Someone with experience in decapitation who also had been an army medic might be able to do that.
Right.
Interesting.
And gay bars were Dahmer's preferred pickup places, but he had picked up at least one known victim from a mall. Now, his MO was drugging older men. So
Yeah.
detractors say that this theory, detractors of this theory say Adam also wasn't his type of victim.
I was gonna say he's white little boy.
Now, wait a minute, though, because here's my thought. All right, Dahmer's youngest known victim was 13.
Mm-hmm.
Now, my brain says that would have been more towards the beginning of his career as a serial killer. So
Yeah.
maybe he started with children,
really young kids.
that
Yeah.
couldn't really fight back. On the flip side, though, once Dahmer had said that he didn't want to rot in prison when he was arrested, and it wasn't like admitting to Adam's murder wasn't going to hurt him. It may have even helped him get the death penalty that he wanted. But the fact was he was sentenced to life in prison, and we all know what happens to child molesters in prison.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So he did have a motive to stay quiet about it if he was involved. And he actually said something very similar to that to a journalist, to like, you know what happens to child molesters in here. Like, I had nothing to do with it. It was almost like he was roundabout confessing without confessing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But anyway, Dahmer, like, they couldn't, there was no physical evidence, just like with Odyss, there was no physical evidence tying Dahmer to Adam. And while there were, people said that there were sightings and all these blue vans were checked and all this nonsense was going on, they didn't have enough
Witnesses are not
to charge him.
reliable,
And,
sadly.
by the time that they were interviewing him about this, he had already, they'd already found 11 skulls in his fridge. Like,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
This is where we're going to go ahead and end part 1. Stay tuned for next week, where we're going to cover additional suspects, evidence, the closing of the case, and the legacy that Adam left behind. If you're super impatient and can't wait for part 2, be sure to head over to our Patreon page, where patrons have part 1 and part 2 available right now.